Alrighty, welcome, and this is Ms. Jenny, and we are going to be going over the chart of a business. So, the first thing I want to just kind of point out here, because it's a little bit of a caveat, analyzing business charts is a fairly recent phenomenon, because prior to this, when astrology was practiced most prolifically, astrology was only practiced by the moneyed classes, and royalty. So people in the merchant classes and obviously the lower classes would either not have use for astrology, or even if they did, they wouldn't be able to afford the astrologer. Excuse me. Which in some cases is still is still the same thing today. The difference, however, is that we have the internet and a prolific amount of information and education available on pretty much anything you could possibly think of, thanks to the internet. So God bless the geeks for introducing the internet to the world. Okay, so with that said, there are some things that are not absolutes because we don't have enough information to corroborate that this is a strong enough pattern consistently that these things are always going to be true. So there's that. So when you're looking at business charts, there's a lot of specific information we don't necessarily have because this is all fairly recent. And also, too, business doesn't look like it used to. So business before used to be the owner, operator, the employees, and then the customers, right? Which of course is transformed into business owner, operator, employees, and then suppliers and customers. And now we've got so many levels of management and executives and people doing various parts of a job between the owner or founder of a company and the actual ground level employees and or customers, that the simple the simple view of the chart is not so simple anymore, and doesn't always yield the kind of information that we need, because we haven't quite figured out where that information is hidden in the chart yet. Okay. The second thing I just want to point out, that I do not have a corporate background or an MBA in business. And this is only important because there are some things that are beyond my comprehension or, scope of experience. So you guys, if you have business backgrounds, are more than welcome to kind of fill in the blanks here for the rest of us. So I can only work with what I know. So we're going to go with astrology in some big broad strokes here, right? Okay, so let's begin. I apologize. My allergies are still not quite 100%. And I am working through it. Okay, so for this chart, before we even get involved in it, I want you to look at the house emphasis in this chart. Because typically when we do a business chart, just like a birth chart, the house emphasis tells us where it is most likely to invest its energy and where it's most likely to be successful. So one of the things that I find really interesting about this particular chart is that we've got all this fifth house, oops, get rid of that white ink. We have all this fifth house emphasis in this chart. And along with that, then we've got a fourth. So we've got a fourth, fifth house thing going on here, as well as second house activation. So normally, if I didn't know anything about this business, for me personally, if I were looking at this chart, the first impression I would have would actually be something along the lines of casinos or gambling or horse racing or some type of speculative risk work, because the fifth house, get rid of this. The fifth house is very much about speculation. Lord, today. It's very much about speculation and gambling and risk taking. Games of chance, competitions, betting, things of that nature. So I would have expected this business to be heavily emphasized in that way, right? The other thing is with this second house emphasis, right? And that's a beautiful second house setup. The other thing is that this is something that I would see as primarily they're having to do with either movable resources such as cash and money, or the acquisition and pursuit of it, because the second house is about our tangible resources. Now, with that, of course, we've got this fourth house emphasis down here, which also indicates real estate and holdings, things of that nature. So on first glance, I would have looked at this chart and I would have assumed that this chart is very much about some type of gambling establishment or casino. And let me just show you something real quick. This is kind of interesting. So I'm going to get rid of a couple things here. So let's, that's not quite what I want. Bear with me. So if we get rid of some of these other asteroids, I've got the asteroids in there because they're interesting as well. So if we get rid of these asteroids, right, and the nodes, let's just get rid of that for a second. And good. All right. So one of the things that we're going to see is the emphasis in this chart. Look at this. Everything is below the horizon or close to the ground. The only planets that are above the chart are Saturn and that angular Uranus-Neptune, which we're going to talk about in a second. But everything else is below the ground. So again, I would, my first impression would have been real estate holdings or some type of physical establishment, a brick and mortar type of business. Now, of course, obviously, if you're here on this video, you know that this is the chart of Amazon.com. So we know this business was never intended to be a brick and mortar business. So it's interesting that all of this stuff is below the horizon. The other thing is obviously Amazon is not a gambling establishment. So casinos, horse racing, gambling, that's, speculative type of businesses. That's not what it is, obviously. The only thing in this chart that makes obvious sense when we look at it is right here. And that's that fourth house emphasis, because obviously Amazon is very much about things being delivered to the home. So there very much is a connection between these fourth house planets and the home. So when we look at a chart, it's a little bit different than when we look at a regular person, a living, breathing with a pulse person's chart, right? So with a business chart, there's a couple of things that we look for. So the first thing, when you look at the 10th house is obviously not the house of career and profession, because it's a business. It doesn't have a career or profession. It is the career or profession. So the 10th house in this particular instance, when we're looking at businesses, has everything to do with the reputation of a company. Its visibility and its status and the esteem that the community that surrounds it holds it in. So the 10th house in a business chart is your reputation. Okay. Now, the first house in the business chart, the degree is very sensitive, but we don't use the ascendant like we would with a person, because it's not, contrary to what Mitt Romney would have you believe, corporations are not people. Where on earth did this guy get that? Anyway, so because corporations are not people, according to nature, the cosmos, and, the divine out there, and the rest of us, we don't use the ascendant like we use in a natal chart. What we do use is the ruler, which in this case, because it's 14 Cancer rising, is going to be the moon in Libra. Now, here's where this gets, this is where it gets, we see the correlation kind of that becomes very interesting, right? So the moon in Libra, as the chart ruler, would indicate something that, because the moon is the cycles of everyday life. It's literally just the day in, day out stuff, right? And Amazon is all about your day in, day out stuff, your needs. What does the moon rule? Your needs. Libra is the sign of partnership. So we would expect this business to be focused on partnering where needs are involved in the home, right? And ta-da, guess what? That's exactly what Amazon does, or is doing these days. So that's where it has ended up going. Now, because this is intercepted down here, because you see this, whenever you've got signs intercepted or kind of locked in and not visible in the house, it means that it takes a little bit longer and a little bit later for it to show up. So it takes a little while before it unlocks. And what we know is that when Amazon first opened, it was very much about being a bookseller, not an everything seller, not a household kind of institution, as it were. And I would imagine if we progress this chart, once that those angles change signs, that would have unlocked this interception, and that's when they would have moved into a more of a partnership with, the needs in the house, as it were, like all the daily needs. And I apologize, I did not progress the chart. But if you have program at home, you can certainly do that. If you go on astro.com, you can put in the information and you can certainly progress the chart for yourself and kind of play around with timing on the angles. Okay. Now we go back, because the sun and the moon are the most important parts of a chart, whether it's a person or a business. So the sun is in the fifth house. So we say to ourselves, well, wait a minute. So this is not gambling. This is not speculative work. This is not a risk-based business. Like, what does that mean? And no, starting a new business, while it is risky, is not considered a fifth house operation. So one of the things that we can guess about this business and its inception, or the very original origins of it, and the motivation for building it. And remember, we're guessing here. The only people who are actually going to know the real truth about the details of this will be the founder himself and the people close to him when they originally started this business. But astrologically looking at this chart, with all this fifth house emphasis, and considering the actual nature of the business, which is not classic fifth house rulership stuff, one of the things that I wonder about, and I'm very curious about this, is if this business was not actually started on a bet or a gamble. Like, literally, I'm wondering and how funny and awful at the same time would that be if this business were actually started as a form of bet between like two executives, right? That kind of a gamble. So there would have been the very real possibility that this would not have worked out. But more than that, the driving motivation would not necessarily have been for any high-minded purpose, or because they specifically saw into the future and knew that they wanted to be, a fixture in a household, as much as, I bet that if I XYZ, like, we can make this work, right? And so I'm wondering if that wasn't a lot of it. The other side of this, of course, is that with all of this fifth house emphasis and all this Scorpio and also this Libra and Leo active in this chart, it is also possible, and this is a much nicer possibility, certainly more romantic, it is also possible that this business was built with the intention of being a testimony of love to the beloved, like this, building this empire for the person that we love, to prove that we can do it for them. Your love allows me to move mountains. And historically, these things have been done. I mean, the Taj Mahal was built specifically for the ruler. I don't remember what the title is, but the ruler's love, his woman. He built the Taj Mahal as a gift to her to show the level and magnitude of his love for her. So it's entirely possible, boys and girls, that Amazon.com, as we know it, was originally built as a testimony to his love for his wife. Which is a much nicer idea than this fluke of a company that they didn't even know was going to be successful, was literally a bar bet that actually turned out really well. Because there would just be no justice in that if that were the case. All the hard work you do in life clearly amounts to nothing unless it's a good bar bet at the right time and place. But we're going to go with he built this as a monument to the love he has for his wife. Let's go with that story. Okay, so now with that said, also just a couple of little things here, right? So let's look over here at the second house. So we've got this juicy Mars, part of fortune, and Ceres all grouped together in that second house. So the second house are the resources of the business. How it makes its money, but also its ability to create an income without the assistance or support of other people, i.e. how able is this business to stand on its own without needing to merge with another business to survive, which we see a lot of in modern businesses, right? So Mars in the second house, there's a lot of drive here to make money, which is good. We want that in a business. It is conjunct the part of fortune, right? Which is also good. So this further emphasizes the focus on making money. But I'm going to come back to Ceres in a minute. But also, look at this. Again, Leo, fifth house, speculation, risk, gambling, game playing. I really don't want to say that this whole thing was a risky venture. That was a gamble and literally kind of like a bet that somebody had between somebody else to see if it would even work. And this was a giant fluke. But it's interesting that we've got this heavy fifth house emphasis in this business. So the other thing too which makes it even harder to determine which direction this might have actually come from, where it originally came from, is because Sirius right here is conjunct this Mars, right? Very, very close. And Sirius is the planet of home, hearth, motherhood, and women. Also, Juno is the planet of marriage and wives, right? It's conjunct Jupiter in that fifth house. Jupiter rules the midhaven of the business, which also gives us an indication of what this business stands for. So it is entirely possible, or maybe it's a combination of both. Maybe this business was a bar bet that was offered in its origin, and he did it and made a success out of it to also do double duty and serve as a testament to his love for his wife, or his ability to reach all new heights, from born of the love in his heart. So I thought that was really interesting. So I don't see a lot of this. We'll go over the chart for Apple in the next video and do some comparisons. But this I thought was fascinating. The many incarnations of Amazon, right? Now, also, one of the other things, let me get this off the screen here, that we're looking at with this chart is, so we have Saturn, okay, which rules that seventh house, up here in the ninth. So one of the things we want to look at is whenever we're looking at charts individually, but especially with a business, we want to look at where some of the problems could be so that we can plan in advance and prepare for them, right? And for that, we're always looking at the malefics, which in this case, because Saturn is up there by itself, we're definitely keeping an eyeball on Saturn and Mars. Now, Mars is supported by this part of fortune, so there's a lot of protection there. So we're not too terribly worried about it. There are some issues here. We're going to get into that in a second. But definitely, we're going to start our, planning, disaster planning and preventative work strategies with Saturn. So Saturn up here in the ninth house and retrograde. So a couple things. Saturn in the ninth, typically, if you're going to have Saturn problems in the ninth house, they will be legal problems. Saturn in the ninth also will indicate problems with the foreigners. Now remember, Amazon, even though it's a global economy we live in, Saturn isn't a USA-based company. This was originally founded in the United States by an American. So this area in the United States is home territory for Amazon. Anything outside of the continental United States then becomes the foreign country that's represented by the ninth. So Saturn in Pisces, or Saturn in the ninth, indicates that if it's going to be problems, typically the real brutal loggerhead kind of logjam problems are going to come from legalities and also overseas dealings. Now, I don't know that much about the company, and I certainly don't know that much about business. So again, what I do know, there's tons more information out there that I'm not following, so you guys are more than welcome to fill in the blanks with some of this stuff if you can corroborate this or challenge the information, because I don't have the time or the wherewithal to do that depth and level of research on the internet about its work history, because there's a lot out there. Good God. Okay, so Saturn in the ninth, legal problems and also problems with foreigners, people outside the U.S. And I believe, so help me out with this, folks, I believe that there have been issues previously with foreign governments, and certainly legal issues with Amazon. The other thing that I thought was interesting is Saturn is in Pisces, and it is retrograde, right? So Saturn in Pisces is a very, very specific kind of thing. So Pisces rules the lowest class amongst us. So it literally rules the homeless, the indigent, the unfortunate, the Les Miserables, right? The Les Miserables amongst us. So Saturn in Pisces represents the most vulnerable members of our society who are at the most disadvantaged. The other thing, and here's what's interesting, Pisces rules the feet. And one of the things that is a constant issue with this company and their work environments is literally the toll it's taking on their body and the labors, and especially their feet. So I thought that was very interesting. Now, Saturn in that ninth retrograde, one of the things that we can look for with anytime you have retrograde planets, it's whatever that planet is showing you is not obvious. It's hidden from view. So Saturn retrograde in the ninth house in anybody's chart, personal or business, but definitely with business, not just Amazon, any business. Saturn retrograde in the ninth is going to indicate there's a lot of legal stuff that is hidden from view. And I don't mean hidden from view because it's not public information. I mean deliberately obfuscated or hidden from view. And in Pisces, a lot of this may have to do with loose ends, and also because Virgo rules details and paying attention to the important critical points. So, and Pisces is the exact opposite. So this Saturn and Pisces in the ninth, and these things that are hidden from view may have a lot to do with obfuscating or hiding things that are a direct result of sloppy paperwork and sloppy attention to details, and literally oversight of things that you should have planned and prepared for. It's like that that person who accidentally set off the emergency nuclear attack alarm in Hawaii. I'm sure you guys have heard about this because it just happened recently. Because apparently there was nobody, and they won't give us the information about how exactly this happened. Poor person got fired for it. But apparently there has been an ongoing issue with something that was never addressed. It's just one little stupid tiny detail that they could have fixed a long time ago, and they just never did because people just always kind of sort of knew that you didn't whatever, or you did whatever. It's just it was an understanding but not officially ever corrected. And of course, naturally, it finally culminated in a false alarm about a nuclear attack. Oh, those poor people. Anyway, so it's that kind of a thing. So Saturn in retrograde in the ninth typically indicates things that are sloppily handled and hidden without being addressed. So that's an issue. Now, one of the things that we're going to notice here is that this Saturn, right, is in quincunx to the moon down in that fourth house. So not completely sure how that plays out in daily practice and running of the business, but what I can tell you, the fourth house is the end of the matter, and it is the end of the story. It's the end of life in a person's chart. So Saturn, and this is an exact quincunx. So Saturn quincunxing that moon and down in the fourth indicates that whatever this Saturn represents that they're not addressing, the very things that they're keeping hidden, that they're not correcting, will literally be the death of the business, and it will cost them a lot. So there's plenty of cost associated with this. And also, too, that I thought was interesting is when we talk about foreigners and legal stuff and the most vulnerable members of our society, I believe in Germany years ago, a classic Saturn and Pisces retrograde in the ninth, right? There was a huge issue with the security people that they had hired to watch over the warehouse in one of the Germany locations, because it was apparently run by it had employed a bunch of neo-Nazis who were literally going out of their way to harass and be extremely hostile and not even reasonably safe to be around the workforce, which at that time employed a lot of immigrants in the system. So I thought that was an interesting correlation with Saturn and Pisces retrograde in the ninth. But it's quincunxing the moon down in the fourth. So I don't know if that actually cost Amazon anything. It would be interesting to see if there was ever a lawsuit for that, and how much it actually ended up costing them. Because it should have, if we're reading the chart correctly, it should have and would have cost them a pretty dime, and maybe even nearly their company. But that's what happens when you know if there's problems and you keep sweeping it under the rug instead of dealing with it. Okay, so Saturn rules that seventh house. So the other thing is that when we're talking about looking for problems, is Saturn rules the seventh house. So seventh house in a business chart are your competitors, and it's also your open enemies, people who are your opposition, as it were, politely or not politely. So we can also look for challenges when it comes to partnerships. This is not a company that would do well in a partnership. This is a company that should never merge with other companies, because it will be problematic. And this is further reinforced by this right here. We have Uranus and Neptune in that 7th house. So the Neptune in the 7th house in a business chart is not great. And Neptune rules that Saturn, which is that weak Saturn. So Neptune has a lot of positive manifestations, but the negative manifestations are even worse, because Neptune is extremes. And Neptune at its worst represents the flim-flam man and the con artist and the hustler, and the sociopath who lies and lies and lies and lies. So Neptune in the 7th in a business chart indicates, when it comes to business partnerships, the propensity to be exploited and taken advantage of, and literally, quote, not see it coming, end quote, is very, very strong. So these are businesses with Neptune in that 7th should never partner with other businesses or make partnerships, because it's just going to end disastrously. The other thing is that Uranus in that 7th house lends itself to sudden infatuations and just as sudden breaks. However, with Uranus, you tend to have one of two things. You either have these things where there's just this compulsive kind of antipathy, where you just realize that you just can't stand each other, and you can't get out of that relationship fast enough, or because Uranus is very unpredictable and much larger and transpersonal, it's also circumstances and situations completely out of our control that become disruptive and break relationships. Now, with this, because this would be partnerships if they were to pursue that, right? Look at this. We have Mercury squaring that, okay? This is not good. Mercury in a business chart are your agreements and your communications. But the thing about business, do not ever forget that business is about the agreements we make. It's all about communicating agreements. I will give you this in exchange for that. I will give you so many of these in exchange for so many of that and so many of those. Well, I will agree to that, except I want that and I want some of this and some of that in exchange instead, because I think this has a little bit more value than just that. So it's all about agreements. And one of the big things with business is that when you don't get what you paid for, what's happened is that the business has broken their agreement with you. And this is why we have a specific branch of law that is literally only and specifically dedicated to contract law, or the legal process of disputing broken agreements. Okay? Mercury rules agreements. So Mercury squaring Uranus and Neptune right there is a bad sign. Okay, so getting into a partnership, this is a guaranteed you just may as well bend yourself over and put the hand grenade up there yourself without the Vaseline. This is not a business that will ever fare well merging or partnering with another business. They will literally get swallowed up and spit out quickly, and they won't even know what happened. So there's that. Now, of course, I'm saying all of this, and somebody's going to come along and say, oh, but Amazon merged with Kraft or whatever. And make me look completely wrong. But if that is the case, and they have in fact merged, partnered, gone full on partnership with another business or corporation, please be specific and give us some corroborating information to validate that. Because I can't see it. I can't see it. But then again, I am not a corporate person with an MBA, so there's a lot of different ways that businesses are configured that are well beyond my vocabulary. So there's a lot here I'm not able to put out there and look at, because it's just beyond the realm of my information. So there you go. Okay. Now the saving grace, because we just looked at this ridiculous quincunx here, right? The world's biggest catch-22. Okay. So, there's got to be something good, right? Well, if you look at this Saturn, what it does is it makes a gorgeous trine to these 5th house planets, the Sun and Venus. And the Sun is the heart of any chart. It is your identity, who you are, your existence, right? And Venus always rules money and pleasure, okay? So with Saturn trining the Sun, right there we've got a very good indication of stability. So the direction this business wants to go in is supported with sustained efforts and organization to take it in that direction, even though Saturn is retrograde. So some of this ability to move forward in the trajectory it's trying to go to may rest on hiding stuff that should have been taken care of and just kind of keeps getting swept under the rug. I don't know. That's not a good statement to make. And remember, I don't know. I'm just looking at a chart. And let's hope that's not the case and it's something else. If somebody has better information about how that's playing out, we would all appreciate it. Now, if you look, Venus, because remember, Venus is your money and your pleasure, right? So here again, retrograde planets. We've got Venus, which is in its fall. Venus does not like being in Scorpio. It is corrupted in Scorpio and it is retrograde. So it can't even express itself the way it wants to. Oy. And it is squaring that second house Mars, that money house Mars. Oh my gosh. So Venus retrograde in Scorpio in that fifth house does not augur well for Venus ruled things. So more than the money, because we've got the money covered here with the second house, more than the money, Venus is about our relationships and the people in our lives. And also because Scorpio is involved, it's about honest to God, it's about taxes, it's about insurance, and it's also about investments. So Venus in Scorpio retrograde does not augur well, doesn't show auspicious promise for human relations, and certainly does not offer strong indication that, see, it's something about money. So taxes, insurance, investments, these things are going to be challenging at best. So being very, very careful, especially because it's aspecting these second house planets. Somebody, whoever's in charge of the money for this company, has to keep a very, very close eye on where the money is and make sure everything's up to snuff, because it's in this particular configuration, it's very, very easy for things to get out of control very quickly, especially for personal indulgences. All this. Which could land them into a lot of trouble. The other thing too, remember, Venus is relationships and Scorpio is about shared resources. So again, this is not a company that should partner with other people, because that will absolutely land them into some type of financial problems, huge ones. But outside of a partnership, acting independently, that Venus Scorpio retrograde here in that fifth house, well, you know, it could get interesting. Now, and it doesn't bode well, again, for human relations. Now, what's interesting is Venus rules that intercepted fourth house Libra, right? And where are they constantly having their problems with human relations? They're not getting hammered for sexual harassment cases. They're not getting hammered for, oh my gosh, I don't know, bad business dealings and defrauding their investors, and, you know, they're not getting hammered for any of the nonsense, like business nonsense, like we see, for example, in Trump Corporation, which is just one long data sheet of just things you should never do to your suppliers and customers. Oh my God. Anyway, but it does, however, involve the fourth house. Remember, the fourth house is real estate. It's the physical, literally the physical environment that we're in, and it's also who we partner with, right? So this fourth house would absolutely represent, ready, the workers. Because in the way the Amazon company is set up, if you think about it, there are literally only 3 jobs in this company. There is executive, right, which is all your managers and your executives all the way up to Bezos. There's the IT department, which is computers. Like, this company has built its success on the computerization and efficient utilization of computer technology to drive the business and make it easier and more convenient to, you know, fulfill its strategies involving psychological marketing employees, which that's a whole other conversation we're not getting into either. And the third department is labor. There are literally only 3 jobs in this company. So when we look at this Venus, right, in Scorpio, ruling this intercepted fourth house, and remember, interceptions are quiet, they're hidden from view, right? So we know, and it's retrograde, we know that if there's going to be problems, it's going to be human relations that more than likely have to do with the people they partner with at the ground level. That would be the labor force. Okay, and who have they had nothing but problems with? The labor force and the work environment and how they're treated. There's a huge ongoing issue with that. And remember, first, interceptions are hidden. So this that is represented by that Libra, which right now, for all intents and purposes, what we're talking about would be the labor force, would be silenced or squashed. There's a lot of stuff that they're not able to voice because that interception keeps them trapped or locked in, hemmed in, as it were, silenced, right? Also, Venus retrograde planets hide things. They don't put it out there in the front for everybody and God to see. Their stuff's behind them, under the rug, behind the door, hidden from public view. It's not for public consumption. So any problems represented by this weak Venus, okay, ruling that fourth house of at ground level labor forces that they partner with, would be hidden from view as much as possible. So the thing about it is, right? Check this out. The thing about it is, look at this. Remember we talked about Saturn retrograde and that being hidden from view and possibly stuff being swept under the rug that could have been fixed, but nobody ever got around to fixing because Pisces is kind of lazy. I hate to admit it, but it's true, right? Well, because it makes a trine to this Venus retrograde in Scorpio, this weak Venus, what it does is it allows these two things to work together even easier. So all this hiding and sweeping under the rug because we're too lazy to actually fix it is actually supportive and works well with this Venus retrograde in Scorpio, which would be the voice of the people, the people that they partner with at ground level, which I'm assuming would be the laborers. So there's a lot going on here. So I thought that was interesting. Now, could it mean anything else? Absolutely. What this could also mean, because remember, we've got multiple combinations of things here, and unfortunately, without more information about how business works or how this thing is structured, I'm limited to how I can kind of go about this. But the other thing that this could possibly mean, because it's Venus, it is money, and also with this Uranus, Neptune in the 7th house, right? And this quincunx to the moon and a couple of other things, because I'm going to be all over the place here. It could also be a matter of being a very Trump-like business where they're basically selling you a whole lot of stuff that they're not able to deliver on. So there is the possibility that there's a whole lot of smoke and mirrors happening because, again, this is very Leo 5th house emphasis in this business. So speculation, risk, gambling, contest, competition, taking chances. This was not intended or designed to be a business that invented the better mousetrap, and that's all it ever does for the rest of its life. So constantly pushing the envelope and taking risks and chances and, seeing, quote unquote, seeing what they can get away with is a constant running theme in this business. Now, so far, it has worked as the consumer's advantage because, we're all benefiting from this. But if there are not enough checks and balances in here, with Mercury squaring Uranus, Neptune in that 7th house, Saturn retrograde in the 9th, trining at Venus retrograde in the 5th, ruling the 4th, la 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 la. It could get messy really quick, and we don't need more bad business in the world, right? Okay. Now, the other thing that I'm going to put out here real quick, and then we're going to move on to the other parts of this chart, is one, the nodes. So I'm not a huge fan of using the nodes in a business chart. I mean, obviously you can. I don't get a lot of use out of them. So for those of you who are waiting for me to say something about the nodes, no, I'm not going to get into it. You're more than welcome to add your own 2 cents, but I don't do a lot with them. I don't find them very useful. The other thing is that when we talk about mega success, like huge, meteoric, like unbelievable, going down in the history book success, which Amazon is currently, we look at Jupiter, Pluto. Jupiter, Pluto in this chart is conjunct, and interestingly, Jupiter is also with Juno, the planet or the asteroid of marriage. So it is, I thought it was interesting that because of his wife supporting him in taking this risk and starting this business, that they were able to activate that Jupiter-Pluto energy and like build the ridiculous monstrously growing empire that Amazon is. So I thought that was interesting. So when you see Jupiter and Pluto together, it's typically not always a significator of ridiculous amounts of not sex, sorry, Scorpio, success. But it could also, on the other side of that, be indicative, especially with the Scorpio emphasis, it could also be indicative of dirty money and criminal elements. So this could just as easily show up in a chart of somebody whose business primarily deals with the underworld, which I don't think this is. And so I'm not trying to end up swimming with the fishes later. So I'm going to say no. This has nothing to do with criminal elements, for God's sakes. Okay. Now, there's a second kind of chart that they do because businesses apparently can incorporate. So, and this is where I get a loss because I don't understand this stuff. So there's a thing where businesses can incorporate and become, I guess they're offering stock or opportunities for other people to invest in their business and reap some of the profit with them by putting confidence in them and purchasing stock, which is basically loaning them financial support. So the Amazon.com IPO or initial something offering occurred in 1997. The birth of the business, oops, sorry, I got rid of all that, didn't I? Was in 1994. 3 years later, they did their IPO. And so from that, we have a secondary chart. Now, I don't understand enough about incorporations and stocks to be able to do anything meaningful with this. I'm just going to go over some little bon mots that I do understand. So the IPO chart always has to do with especially doing predictions with the stocks and the values of the business. One of the things to understand when you're doing your business charts is the original chart will always stand. This never changes. Okay, this is the birth chart. This is the entity. This is the heart and soul of the chart. Everything else is just a different version or stage of development for the business. So it's like the difference between who you are essentially and who you are at different stages of your life. You are you no matter what, but you're a different person at 5 than you are at 15 than you are at 50. Those are different stages of life and different versions of you, but you're still always you with your own special, unique destiny and life path. So it's the same thing with business charts. When you do the incorporation charts or the secondary charts, they are, remember, secondary. So this chart we're going to assume has a lot to do with the financial health of the company and also how the company is going to perform under its current leadership based on this IPO, right? So because they may have to actually put other people in charge or make more executive positions in order to incorporate and offer stocks. I don't know. But if that's the case, you would have changes of leadership that went with it. So this chart will tell us a lot about how the company will perform under the current leadership that came in 97, right? So I didn't go too far back. I know in 2015, just pulling numbers out of the air, that there were some interesting things going on. And people who work for the company at that time that can remember will often say that it was around 2015 that things started to change. And I thought that was very telling. So I went back and looked in the ephemeris. Well, lo and behold, honey pie, look at this. In 2015, Jupiter was going through Leo, right? So Jupiter was here and it made its ingress into Virgo. In the incorporation chart, we've got the moon and Mars in the North Node in Virgo, okay? So one of the things that we would expect is when Jupiter, which rules right here, that rules the reputation of the company, right? When Jupiter went down and crossed over this moon, this would have changed the business substantially. So 2015, something happened and a more Virgo-esque type of approach would have occurred when it came to the day-to-day operations, because the moon is day-to-day stuff. The Virgo is the minutia, the details, the schedules and time and numbers and all that persnickety, like anal retentive stuff. So right about the time Jupiter went into Virgo, and especially when it hit that degree where the moon is, which would have been, got it right here, baby. I don't have it right here. So it ingressed into Virgo in August. August was a big month. August of 2015 was a big month for them. So I'm thinking like September-ish would have been, September, October would have been when Jupiter hit that moon in Virgo in the incorporation chart. And that's when things should have gotten really tight. Depending on how you look at it. So some people might look at it as running a tighter ship. Oh, we're only running a tight ship now. And other people might have just seen it as very mean and hair splitting, which is also what you get with Virgo, right? Can't see the forest for the trees. Now, the incorporation chart, if you look, the angles are almost the same, right? So here, we've got Cancer rising, and we have Aries on the midhaven. In the birth chart for the business, Cancer rising, so that stays the same, which is kind of interesting. But look at this. The midhaven changes. So in the incorporation chart, in the new reinvention of Amazon, the midhaven, or the public image, the direction, because the midhaven is also the direction you're going in life. The direction of the company would have also changed in 97 with this incorporation, and it went to Aries. So for that, now what we look at is Mars. Where is Mars in this chart? What direction is it now going in? Well, look at this. Mars in the incorporation chart, ruling the midhaven, is in Virgo in the third house. So here I would expect, I don't know because I wasn't around then, and I don't know anybody who worked for the company at that time, but I would expect that about the time that this company was incorporated and Mars became the ruler of the direction the company was going in, that because it's the third house, data, and literally hair splitting, and how thin can we slice an onion, and being as cheap as possible. Like, how much can we possibly squeeze out of these scraps before we finally throw them away? I believe, based on this, that 97, when they incorporated, and September, October, is right about the time that should have been their focus. Or they would have moved into that focus and really became, excuse my language, but real a-holes about things. And I say this because Mars in Virgo is a pain, a royal, anal retentive, obsessive compulsive pain. And it literally is the can't see the forest for the trees kind of issue. Now, Mars in Virgo is a bit of a workaholic, so work and work volume and literally working people to death, as it were, would have become an acceptable trajectory for them to be on. Again, how thin can we slice this onion? How much can we get out of this scrap before we finally throw it away? Because Virgo hates waste. So that should have kicked in. So the other thing that we now look at is, okay, well, if that's the case, like, what is this Mars doing? Is it supported? Is it having hard aspects? Like, how is this Mars direction for the company, now that it's incorporated, integrating with the other facets of the business? So for here, and this is kind of unfortunate because the Mars isn't really making any strong positive aspects. So this may not have been a great move for the company, or the leadership installed at that time may not have been a great move for the company. Time would have told, and people who are familiar with the company's growth and processes between the time it started in 94 to the incorporation in 97 to now would have a better sense of how these things actually played out. So if any of you have that information, please feel free to share it. I personally don't, which is kind of sad because I think it would be fascinating, at least from a learning point of view. All right, so here's our Mars. This is the direction, the new focal point of the direction of the company, right? What aspects does it make? Well, honey, not really a whole lot, actually. The only aspects, and this is a really unfortunate thing, the only aspects that this planet is making are two quincunxes to Jupiter and Saturn, right? Which actually forms a yod, or a finger of God aspect. So if we take these aspects individually, and worse, the ruler of Saturn, because it's in Aries, is Mars. So Mars is quincunxing itself, as it were. So Mars quincunx Saturn is a very challenging position because it can make it mightily insensitive. And the reason it makes it mightily insensitive is because quincunxes are your blind spots, right? So you don't necessarily, you're not necessarily able to hook those two things together to make a coherent sentence. So it's like a blinking light, on, off, on, off. Like you can only give your attention to one or the other, but never at the same time, so that they work together. Quincunxes deserve a lot more conversation than I can give right here. But essentially, think of it as a blinking light that's going on and off, or a blind spot. So with Mars and Virgo, which can be mean, listen, you folks out there with Mars and Virgo, you know you can be meaner than the Marquis de Sade, for God's sakes. You make Pol Pot look like a party guy when you're not happy. Anyway, Mars and Virgo, quincunxing that Saturn and Aries. And Saturn and Aries is mean as all get out too. Because Saturn and Aries, as a rule, is a very self-absorbed position. It's got a lot of growing and evolving to do in this lifetime that has everything to do with getting out of itself and its own identity and its own ego, and identity formation, and becoming more aware of other people. So Saturn in Aries is literally one extreme or the other in terms of codependence. We either love other people so much we lose ourselves in them, or we are so needing to love ourselves that we freeze other people out because there's just no room for them in our lives and our hearts and psyches, right? So Mars quincunxing Saturn like this would indicate a real issue with insensitivity, and also a constant pushing to reach a goal without being mindful or sensitive or aware. Because remember, quincunxes are blind spots, or aware of the limits of the situations, the people, and the environments around you. So Mars quincunx Saturn literally pushes things to breaking points because they don't know when to quit. Their awareness doesn't allow them to integrate that information easily or coherently. Now, Mars quincunxing Jupiter, same thing, blind spot, blinking light, on off, on off, on off. If attention goes to one, attention goes to the other, but never at the same time. So we're not able to merge those two pieces of information together in a full sentence that makes sense, right? Well, what does Jupiter do? Jupiter pushes the boundaries and expands everything. And Jupiter in Aquarius is very ideological, so it's very much about the grand vision, the idea, what's possible, the future. So Jupiter in Aquarius, it's this constant race to the future. Mars in Virgo, it's very much about keeping your nose to the grindstone and working. So Mars quincunxing Jupiter is somebody who's so invested in this idea, whatever their wild idea is this time, that they literally push, work, and there's not necessarily all the steps between that make these things happen. So it's kind of like when the age of flight, when they were first trying to build airplanes to fly, this would have been the person who was working in their garage trying to make wings to fly with, because they have this vision, this grand, growing, glorious vision of flight, and they're so focused on attaching the little teeny tiny feathers to their little teeny tiny metal arms so they can flap human wings and fly, that they're missing all the steps between their arms and flight, which would involve things like gravity and basic engineering and, maybe better designs, in how to make flight happen. So that's that Mars, Jupiter, Virgo, Aquarius kind of quincunx. Yikes, right? Now, with Yods and Finger of Gods, they're terribly challenging to work with. And I'm not going to, for the sake of time, I'm not going to get into it here. But let's just say, let me just leave you this. With a quincunx, or a double quincunx, or a Yod, essentially all of this tension from these two planets, it's all coming through here, right? So this is kind of like a violin string stretched to its absolute taut extreme. It can't go any further or it's going to break. That creates a tremendous amount of energy and force. And typically what happens is all of that tension and built up pressure boomerangs out through the opposite side. So anything coming in around 18 Pisces is going to be so picture this for me. You're pulling a bowstring back as far as it'll go, right? And you're feeling that string and the tension building. The further back you go, the more tension you're feeling in the string, like you can feel it. And with that tension, what you're feeling is power building up, energy building up in the string, right? That moment when your fingers, bing, let go and that string snaps back into place, and all that energy now is thrust forward and out of the string into the atmosphere. Your fingers are this. Your fingers are that degree opposite the focal point of this yacht. So any planet or transit crossing this, right, is going to activate that. So if we look at 18 Pisces, because I'm pretty sure we had something that transited that. Let's take a look at that. So 18 Pisces. So Mars would have hit that in February of 2015. 2015, 2016 were not good years for this company. A lot of challenges. So in February of 2015, that would have activated. But I'm pretty sure we had an eclipse at that degree. Yes, boys and girls. I knew it. In April of 2016, we had an eclipse at 18 Pisces. That would have activated that sensitive degree at the opposite point of this finger of God, or the yacht formation. And Mars would have activated that degree. Look at that. Mars would have activated this degree down around September. September of 2016, and also they would have been feeling it. Yeah, 2015, 2016 were not good years. Actually, we've got a bunch of eclipses in 2015, 2016 that were happening around that degree, 18 Pisces Virgo. So they were really getting banged around. If anybody knows anything about the history of the company, it would be interesting to see what exactly was going on in 2015, 2016, because man, it must have been a heck of a couple of years. Okay, now, with all of that, let me get rid of all this, right? Make it nice and clean. Okay, so with all of that, now, the other thing in the 2015 year, in May of 2015, Saturn stationed retrograde at 3 Sagittarius. And 3 Sagittarius in this chart would have been right here on their Pluto. So Pluto in this particular instance, and again, this business with fifth house of speculation and risks and gambling. So Saturn stationing retrograde on Pluto in that fifth house, and Pluto would rule the fifth house, would indicate there's the possibility that around that time, or certainly during that year, there would have been some risks taken that would have pretty much almost cost them their shirt, because that would not have been the time to get involved in any type of risky ventures, because it literally, everything that they were taking big chances on were coming back to bite them on the butt when Saturn went retrograde right there on that degree. Huge unpleasant things were happening at that time. So I don't know what that is, but couldn't have been good. All right, and in June of 2015, right, here we go. In June of 2015, Saturn would have gone stationed direct. It would have gone into Scorpio, and it would have stationed direct right here in the summer of 2015, 2015. And that 29, 28 degrees Scorpio, right? And look at this. It's right there. Again, with Pluto in the fifth house, except in this particular instance, because this is the actual birth chart, not the incorporation chart, this Saturn activity that we're seeing in the incorporation chart, again, it's still playing out, and we're seeing it reinforced, doubly so, down here in the birth chart. So whatever was going on in 2015, 2016 was huge, I tell you. Now, Saturn in the business chart rules the seventh house, and also Aquarius. So it'd also be the eighth house in the ninth. So Saturn, here we go, in the business chart rules the seventh, the eighth, and the ninth, because Saturn is co-ruler for Aquarius. In the incorporation chart, Saturn rules the seventh and the eighth. So I'm thinking like something should have cost them plenty. There was a bad gamble that kind of came and bit them on the butt that year, but also would have had a deep, profound impact on the company and the spirit of the company and the way the company is going. Because Pluto like rocks you to your roots. So whatever this is, was a lot bigger than just taking some financial losses. The seventh and the eighth house is a lot to do with partnerships, which for Amazon also would be their customers. Their customers are their partners. And the eighth house also has to do with taxes and investments and insurance and stocks. So I'm curious to see if anybody knows what exactly was going on in 2015 and 2016. In 2016 also, right? In September of 2016, we had another eclipse at 9 Virgo. And that would have, let me get rid of this for us. That would have been close to that the business chart Saturn at 5 Pisces. But more importantly, in the incorporation chart, that eclipse at 9 Virgo hits that moon in Virgo in the 3rd house. So there should have been something, what a messy, messy couple of years. There should have been something that proved to be problematic for them as far as information gathering. Yeah, so that's kind of wonky. So the moon in their incorporation chart, it is squaring Venus. It is also quincunxing Uranus. And because this is a very computer technology driven company, and Gemini rules information and data, and Aquarius rules computers and technology and networking systems, and Virgo is very much about the details, right? How thin can we slice this onion? And we've got squares and quincunxes involved. I would have expected to see that at this time with this eclipse in 2016, right here, this 2016 fall 2016 eclipse, I would have expected some problems coming up that had a lot to do with information and data gathering and computers, if they weren't actually having problems with their computers, like being hacked or something like that. So I'm not completely sure what that is. Maybe you guys know better than I do, right? Okay. All right, so that is that for that. Interesting stuff, huh? I wish I knew more about the workings of the company. Yeah, and see Saturn here in 2015, 2016. Saturn was all over the moon and the Mars in this company's incorporation chart. So documents, communications, data, all these things, you know, and also their focus, because the 3rd house is what you focus on, would have been really challenged. Those entire 2 years would have forced we hope, some changes for the better. Anyway, yeah, I wish I knew more about the company, the inner workings of the company, and the history, so that we could see how this actually played out. But I don't have that information. I'm really hoping somebody out there listening does, because we would like to see how this stuff correlates with what we're seeing astrologically. Okay. Oh, this is transits coming up, right? Okay. So let's go to the present day. So here we have the incorporated chart, and here we have the business chart, right? So this is the business. This always trumps everything, and this is the secondary chart. So this time, what we're going to look at, we're going to go back a little bit in time. This time we're going to go to 2017, right? Now what's interesting is in 2017, around Black Friday, Neptune stationed direct at 1128 Pisces. It's the degree, which is also, by the way, the degree of the eclipse this January 31st that we were just talking about. Remember, the January 31st, 2018 eclipse at 12 Leo, the only aspects that it is making is to Neptune at 11 or 12 Pisces, and the trans-Neptunian planet Poseidon, which is also at 12 or 11. So Neptune is very, very active and integral to the eclipse that just occurred in January 2018. And prior to this, Neptune stationed direct at that degree. So we've got a theme playing out here. There's something important about this Neptune that's really kind of getting highlighted as far as this business is concerned. Well, here's what I want you guys to look at, right? Neptune in the business chart rules their midhaven, their reputation, and the direction of the company. So Neptune stationing direct, or changing directions, but definitely stationing direct, involving their midhaven and the direction of the company was a big, big deal. Well, guess what happened Black Friday, boys and girls? And remember, Neptune is in, wait a minute. Where'd it go? Oh, sorry. Oh. The Black Friday, this Neptune station direct is in their 9th house. Black Friday, the warehouses in Germany and Italy went on strike, all of them. And as far as I know, because there's only a little bitty blip about that on the internet, interestingly, it wasn't covered very widely here, but we've got so much distraction in the news now, it's hard to keep up with, Jesus, with the comedy tour that we're dealing with. So this really would have been, in terms of newsworthy, a small blip compared to other stuff that was hitting the news. But on Black Friday in Europe, and Neptune stationed direct in their ninth house, which is foreigners, right? And Neptune rules their midhaven, which is the business's direction and a reputation. They all went on strike. So I thought that was very, very interesting. And what I would also say is that, because apparently strikes are not unusual in Europe, it's certainly not with Amazon, good Lord. But what I will say is that in this particular instance, this particular strike, for whatever reason, has a lot more portent and magnitude than the other one. So there are some serious changes of direction that have or should be resulting from that activity around this Neptune station, which would have been the strikes, right? The lockout strikes. So I thought that was interesting. So that is what just happened. Now, we talked about that eclipse in January, right? The January 31st eclipse. So here, look at that, right? We've got that moon and the north node in at 12th degree of Leo. And the only thing it's aspecting, of course, is this Pisces at 12 degrees, which is also the degree that Neptune's stationed. So we've got this definite pattern involved here that's a lot of Neptune activation, a heavy Neptune emphasis, which for the company has everything to do with their direction and their reputation, right? So the other thing is that this degree of the eclipse, look at that, 12 and 15, Leo, right? Well, look in the business chart, look at that. It's right here. So it is absolutely affecting their second house or their physical resources. So their money or their financial health should have taken some kind of a hit with this. Now, what's interesting is that because the part of fortune is involved, there's a lot of protection here. And there's also the possibility that this was beneficial to them. I'm not completely sure how that would have worked out. I don't have that information. But it is something to consider. The other is because this eclipse was at 12 Leo, right? It squares, look at this, that Venus retrograde in Scorpio. Remember, we talk about human relations and how their Achilles heel, their weak spot is human relations, here at the ground level. Well, this eclipse activated that. Okay, so this eclipse activated this, which has, I'm pretty sure that this would have to suggest the labor forces. And this goes right back, to that Neptune, okay, that Neptune station that we know, occurred back here around Black Friday. So there's some big stuff going on that has a lot to do with the labor forces and the company's reputation and direction. And because the eclipses and the Neptune station, all of this stuff is hammering them big time. So there's an evolutionary demand here that has to be met. It will be interesting to see exactly what that is and how that plays out, right? Okay. Now, we are not out of the woods yet. One of the other things that this company is looking at in February, just in a couple of weeks, as a matter of fact, depending on when you guys see this video, in February 2018, we've got another Leo eclipse coming up at 27 Leo. Well, look at this. It's, again, Pluto. It's going to hit their Pluto in the 5th house. So there's a lot of activation and energy and fateful changes that will impact them, and certainly the heart of the business, because this is the 5th house. So one of the things that I would look at, because it's Pluto involved, is I would go back to the 2015 charts, right? Or the years 2015, 2016, when Pluto was being activated. Because remember, we were talking about it here. See that? We were talking about this. The Saturn hit that degree back here in 2015. So there's anything that was being impacted right here. Anything that was being impacted okay, by the Saturn stationing retrograde and certainly stationing direct, right? So the Saturn that was being activated right here, I would look at what area of the business was being hit at this time, because that is being revisited. Now, the difference, of course, Saturn, when Saturn crossed this Pluto down here in that fifth, whatever area of the business was being hit by this was not pleasant. Oh my God. I've got ways to describe this that I would not use, I would not describe in front of children because it's just that way. So that area of the business is getting hit again, right? Now, the thing about it, though, is if we look, where are we? Here we go. This eclipse, again, is going to hit that. So this eclipse is absolutely bringing that Pluto and Scorpio business right back front and center. So whatever it is, it's back on the table. And it's coming up right now. Now, this eclipse will get activated. Let me see. I have to double check because I don't have the activation dates here. The eclipse will get activated usually a couple weeks later, but it's definitely in effect for the next 6 months or so. Yeah, we'll go back to that. But we're going to see it. So this will be interesting to see how this plays out, right? Now, Pluto in the business chart, of course, rules the fifth house. We talked about this. Risk, speculation, gambling, and it's also stocks. Your stocks are also part of your fifth house as well, not just your eighth. And also children. So whatever in a business, your children would be any offshoot or offspring businesses from the parent company. So this could easily be one of the smaller add-on businesses that came on board later, the children of the parent company, or subsidiaries, I guess they would call them, that may be getting hit, that's getting all this attention and all this excitable work. Not completely sure. But we will definitely see. The other thing I just want to point your attention to, because this is the business chart, right? If you notice, the natal or natural Jupiter, the natal Jupiter and Pluto, we know they're both together in Scorpio, right? So this company technically is on a Jupiter return. Now, Jupiter returns are typically very, very lucky. Like, there's a lot of good stuff that comes with Jupiter returns. Mostly, not always. So, how a Jupiter return plays out for you has a lot to do with how well Jupiter integrated into your chart. Now, with this particular company, because Jupiter is near Pluto, it's going to come close. Let me see what we got here. Jupiter... March. All right. So because Jupiter is very close to that Pluto, and that particular combination is an augury for meta success and large scale things and mega corporations, not just corporations. So anytime you see Pluto involved, and especially Jupiter, Pluto, and good God, Jupiter, Pluto, and Scorpio, you're not just talking about big business, you're talking about global empires, which is kind of frightening because we kind of need more than 3 shops to shop at in life. I'm just saying. Just as a sidebar, there used to be a thing called a company town. So, when you went out to these places like in the West to do mining and stuff, you would have to go live in these shanty towns because that's where the mining was. So there were a lot of little makeshift towns that kind of sprang up. And you'll see this a lot out in the West, here in the United States. These little towns that kind of sprang up around the industry that was there, which would have been mining, right? Or panning for gold and all that sort of stuff. And typically what would happen, because there was nowhere else to go for miles and miles and miles around, like you were pretty much stuck with whoever was the supplier of goods and food in that location. Those suppliers of goods and food were owned by the company. So, there's this thing apparently that they used to do where you would work for your wages, but then of course you would spend all your wages on sundries like food and your rent and new shoes, new clothes. Like you literally, by the time you got done paying for the stuff that you needed just to live so that you could do your work, there was nothing left for you to spend to do anything else. So you were pretty much enslaved to the company, going in and coming out. And if we have a mega corporation, a global mega corporation like a Jupiter, Pluto, Scorpio would suggest as possible, they could literally turn pretty much nearly the entire globe into a company town where we're basically working to, support the company owner. And that's not okay. Like, geez, Louise, you need variety in life, and that's just not healthy. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. You know how that goes, right? So this February eclipse will be hitting that Jupiter-Pluto, and specifically that Pluto. So it will be fascinating to see how this plays out. At the same time, they're currently in 2018 on a Jupiter return. So we should, because it's the fifth house in stocks, theoretically, we should see their stocks go up. So March, we should see some major stock activity, for better or worse. Jupiter will station retrograde at that time, around the beginning of March. It will happen again, this Jupiter changing direction. And more specifically, it will get down close to that 21st degree of Scorpio and activate natal Jupiter and effectively give it its Jupiter return in September, October of 2018. And that will be the last pass Jupiter makes, as far as I can tell. Yeah, that will be the last pass Jupiter makes across that Scorpio planet. So whatever major global, like earth-shaking developments that this company is going to do that will impact everyone around them, not just them and their shareholders, we should see some suggestion or rumblings about it this March, literally just a month or so away. And that's assuming you have access to that type of information. And definitely we should see the manifestation of it or the fallout of it come September. So exciting times ahead. This is probably a really good time to own stock in the company. But maybe not such a good time for the rest of us, because, who wants to live in a company town where you basically work to buy the things that you need to live and you never have anything left over and they're the only employer around and supplier? But maybe that's not what it is. Maybe that's not what it is. Maybe Amazon will do something amazing that will improve and elevate mankind somehow, some way, above and beyond mass compulsive consumerism. One can only hope. We are under the 12 Leo eclipse, and there's a lot of Neptune activation in these charts. So let's hope and pray for miracles that Amazon will lead the way out of darkness to a more evolved, enlightened way of being a business in this world. So that's what I'm shooting for, baby cakes. Okay, now let's go to the IPO chart or the incorporation chart, because I got to look at both of them. So in your corporation chart, we've got, again, with predictions and transits, we've got some exciting stuff happening. So the 27 Leo eclipse we just talked about that hits the business charts, Jupiter, Pluto, and specifically their Pluto, will be occurring here in their 8th house of stocks and shared resources. So it will be interesting to see what type of changes are occurring for them in terms of their business and their business holdings. This particular eclipse at 27 is not actually making any other aspects, except a very, very wide out of sign trine to Mercury. So it should be a positive thing. So I would look for something positive, at least for the company. So let's all hope for that. The other aspect is that it will square the sun for the incorporation chart, or the most recent incarnation of Amazon. It is a wide square, but it is the sun. We give a large orb. It is an eclipse. We also give it a large orb. So in this particular case, it is squaring that sun in the 11th house, which rules groups of people, but also more importantly, the future and progress and things that we do for people at large in the community. So whatever this eclipse is that's activating their Pluto will definitely impact the community at large as well. And given that Amazon is a global company, this would be the global community. So let's all put our thoughts and prayers into Amazon stepping up to a more enlightened version of itself rather than the current toxic corporate mentality that we're dealing with. And no, Mr. Romney, corporations are not people, you weirdo. Jesus, what kind of crack are you smoking? If corporations are people, it needs to start dating me and buying me dinner before it screws me over. I'm just saying. Anyway, sorry. Okay. With the incorporation chart, some things that we're actually going to watch for as well, which is only a month off of the September-October dates that we're getting for the business chart. so this fall would be a very powerful time for Amazon. So some exciting things are on tap as far as the cosmic divine is concerned. So it would be interesting to see how these things actually play out in the physical world, right? So Mars will retrograde in August from Aquarius back into Capricorn, and then it will turn around and station direct again later in Capricorn and start moving forward again. What's fascinating and important about these stations, when Mars stations retrograde, it's going to do it right here on that Uranus. And again, Uranus in the incorporation chart rules stocks and investments and mergers, right? I really hope they don't merge, because that's literally going to be the death of the company. And it's the same thing in the regular business chart. So this Uranus rules exclusively the 8th house, okay? Which is also insurance. So insurance, taxes, legacies, okay, mergers, shared resources, all of these things come under the auspices of the 8th house. So Mars retrograde is absolutely activating that, right? Now, when it turns around and goes direct, so when it's going retrograde, what we know is that it is revisiting something. So there is typically obstacles or setbacks, but they're really just opportunities for you to go back and rework something, because it's like the wheels falling off the car. Now you really do have to stop and fix the thing. You can't just keep going, right? So you got to go backward a little bit. So Mars retrograde means they're going to revisit and redo things that have to do with the 8th house, which has to do with anything involving insurance, taxes, legacies, merger, shared resources, things that involve the participation and cooperation of other people, because the 8th house is also the support you get from other people, hence stocks. Now, the reason this is also fascinating is if you look, when Mars goes direct, oh, look at this. Right there on Neptune. And again, bang, right back to this Neptune emphasis in the chart. How's that? So we know for sure that Neptune is a heavy, heavy hitter. This is a power player in this chart, in both of the charts. So Neptune transits, Neptune activations, all these things are very, very important for this chart in terms of the business itself. The other thing is that we know that Neptune rules, let me get this out of here, right? The midhaven, the direction of the company, the public face of the company, the trajectory, where they're trying to go, and where they should go, because the midhaven is the direction in life. So even though the incorporation has kind of changed their focus a little bit, right? So the incorporation gives them an Aries midhaven, so they've changed their direction a little bit as a result of incorporation, and it's become a very Mars in Virgo sort of endeavor, and we talked all about that earlier. At the end of the day, you can't get away from who you really are, your essential nature. And even a business has an essential destiny or an essential nature. You build a business based on something, so it has a trajectory it wants to follow. So it'll wobble, but it's still heading in that direction. And in this chart, the original business chart, the direction and trajectory of this business is all Pisces Neptune. It's all Pisces Neptune, cradle to grave. So with this right here, with this Neptune at 29 Capricorn retrograde and Mars stationing on that degree and going direct, means that something is going to get sorted out. So I don't know what's going on, and it's possible because remember, Neptune rules, and it has been sitting in their 9th house of foreigners. So everything outside the U.S., this Neptune activity has definitely been impacted by, right? Or has been impacting, I should say. So it is entirely possible, because we don't know over here if they're still dealing with a fallout from the strikes that occurred on Black Friday, which reverberated through this company or this corporation in big time, in much bigger waves than they're letting on. Just astrologically, based on what we're seeing. So maybe that's what it is, and maybe they'll finally get it straightened out, and the company will have a newer, healthier, better direction that it heads in. Or maybe it could be something completely different that shows a more humanitarian side of the company. Or maybe, because Neptune is in the 7th of the incorporation chart, and also the business chart. And, it could also be the flim flam man. So maybe the world's biggest con is about to get played when Mars goes direct on that Neptune in the 7th house. I don't know, baby cakes. Your guess is as good as mine. So it will be fascinating to see this play out. So that, my lovelies, is the chart of a business. Okay. All right. So we're going to end it here. As always, if you guys have any questions, feel free to post them in the comment section. We'll be happy to get to it. Also, again, and most important, remember, if you have something to say about the working conditions at Amazon, I'm not discouraging you from sharing that. I am, however, suggesting that you bring that over to my page under, well, I'll put a video up so you can put your comments over there. But try not to clutter up Lotta's page with, no, you know what? We'll do it the other way. I will put the business chart on my side, and we'll keep the Jeff Bezos chart on her side. That way, if you guys have anything to say about the working conditions, you can absolutely keep it on my side, and I'll just make a mention of it over there. All right, or something. I don't know. We'll work it out. But try to keep the comments about the working conditions on my page, not Lotta's, if you can, just to make it nicer for Lotta, because she likes things light and fluffy on her page. Because a lot of her viewers prefer light and fluffy. So that's it. This has been awesome. I enjoyed going over this chart with you guys, and I hope you guys have a great day. Bye.